ASU is one of the 5 schools in America where we actually build NASA hardware on campus with students, which I had no idea. And so I thought, whoa, that's the coolest thing ever. What do I need to do to work for him?
Welcome to Learning from Experience, a podcast for college students and recent grads who want to hear directly from alumni and how they've adjusted their lives post-graduation, including personal stories of success, career readiness, and tips for navigating the real world. I'm your host, Megan Finnerty. Today, I'll be talking with Aditya Khuller. He's earned 3 degrees from Arizona State University, starting with his bachelor's in aerospace engineering in 2019, then joined the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, where he got his master's degree in 2021 and a PhD in 2023, both in geological sciences from the School of Earth and Space Exploration. He is currently a postdoctoral researcher at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. Aditya's research interests include studying planetary ices, surface processes, and the atmospheres using a combination of numerical modeling, remote sensing data, and geological mapping. He also has experience with NASA's flight hardware development and testing for thermal infrared instruments, electric propulsion, and missions operations software. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So to start, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and your current position?
Yeah, so I grew up in India, and like you said, I came in 2015, and then my current position, I'm a postdoc. So after finishing my PhD, I started working here a year and a half ago. And what I've worked on the most is ices and snows on Earth and Mars mainly. But what I'm doing right now is a little different, where it's still ice, but ice that's turned into gas around a comet, which is a ball of mainly ice and dust that turns into gas when it gets close to the sun. When
you started here at ASU, did you expect to be where you are now?
No, I had no idea, because when I was in India, I always liked space. I knew I wanted to do something that was related to space. So when I was growing up, I thought I'd want to be a professor, or do astronomy and study stars. And then everyone said, oh, you'd probably have to be a professor. And I didn't think I wanted to be a professor at the time. So I thought, okay, what if I build things that go into space? And so do aerospace engineering. And so in India, I lived with my mom in a small apartment. And when I was graduating, she wanted to get me out of there and finally start this yoga studio that she always wanted. And so we made this deal that if I did aerospace engineering, because in India, there aren't that many labs and there isn't much money to do that, but NASA's here. And so we did a survey of schools, and ASU seemed to be pretty promising. And so I joined ASU in the end, and I joined the Honors College, which is really helpful because there were some additional scholarships available to international students that are not available otherwise through Barrett. And I loved my experience at Barrett. Within my first week, I met this professor who is a NASA scientist at ASU who teaches the intro level class. And he said, in this back room, we're building this instrument that's about to go to this asteroid. And I'm a scientist, but I lead a bunch of engineers. And students are actually working on these projects. ASU is one of the 5 schools in America where we actually build NASA hardware on campus with students, which I had no idea. And so I thought, whoa, that's the coolest thing ever. What do I need to do to work for him? And I literally, after class, I would just ask him questions. Sometimes I even knew the answer, but I just wanted to talk to him. And eventually I said, okay, what do I need to do to work for you? And he said, just keep bugging me and get good grades. And so I kept doing that. And then finally, that first summer, I needed a job. And he said, okay, you've shown you're persistent. And so he gave me a job at his Mars Space Flight Facility. And he said, I wrote this paper on snow melting on Mars. Prove me wrong. I'll see you at the end of the summer. And I've been working with him ever since then, since 2016. And I did my PhD with him, and I really loved it. And I'm still working on that same stuff now.
For students who may not know, how does aerospace engineering connect with geological sciences?
Yeah, so it actually doesn't. And so, I should have mentioned that after meeting Phil Christensen, the professor I was talking about, I found that I was able to use different areas of math and science and apply it to being something akin to a space detective, where you actually see an image on Mars, let's say, and you see what looks like snow, but you don't know what it is. And then you take an image later on from a satellite and you see if anything has changed. And so you're looking at clues, and then you see, okay, what's the temperature? And then do we have a radar image? And do we have a thermal image? And then you try to put these pieces of a puzzle together. And then you look at, oh, what did this person say in 2001 from this other image? And then you piece them all together. And so a lot of the skills you learn from aerospace engineering apply because you learn the fundamental math, science, and engineering skills that can then be applied pretty widely. So I think that was useful to have as a background going in. And then also programming is a big one, because in the geology major, you don't do as much programming as in aerospace engineering, because after the second year in aerospace, almost all the classes had a programming aspect, and that's come in incredibly handy. And sorry, one other thing which you didn't ask me about, but I found very helpful, is just to ask for help in general. Like the reason I got that job and the PhD and all of that stuff was just by asking. And I found that often people are just scared of asking, and they'll think, oh, they'll say no. And they could say no half the time or more than half the time, but you just need one yes. And so I found that ASU, because it's such a big school, there's just so many resources in terms of funding and equipment that you just had to seek them, and they're there.
That's a great point. What kept you here? What would you say it was?
Well, I liked everything about ASU except the weather. But I think, it was the environment of being able to work with this incredible professor and the team that he had assembled he's been here since the 80s, and this incredible heritage that we have of working with NASA and building NASA hardware was unique. And with him, I got a lot of freedom. And so I really enjoyed that. And then, the access to all these resources, again, like I mentioned, the equipment, the funding, I think that was very helpful and unique. Yeah, so I loved it.
When you were a child, you wanted to be a scientist. What originally got you interested in planetary science? Was it always your passion?
No. So in the beginning, I was interested in stars and studying astronomy, but and no one in my family knew about astronomy, although my grandfather, one of them, was an electrical engineer. And so we would play chess together and talk about space and things like that. And I had a bunch of encyclopedias that my parents had bought that had space, and I found them very interesting. And then, I had never heard of planetary science until my first week when I met Phil Christensen at ASU, when he introduced it in this class called Introduction to Exploration. So I think that's how I found out. And I think I like it much more because it feels more tangible, because you can look at Mars and actually send something there and then get data back. Whereas for the stars and exoplanets and things like that, there's just so far away that we, in our lifetimes and even the next, we're never going to get there. Yeah, so that's, I think, why I like planetary science anyway.
Well, how did you land at your current role, and how excited were you to become a postdoctoral researcher at NASA?
So my first summer I worked on campus with Phil at the Mars Space Flight Facility. And then I had also applied. Another thing that ASU has is through the engineering school, they have something called FURI, which is the Fulton Undergraduate Research Initiative, where they give you money to do research. And so on the other hand, I was doing some aerospace engineering research, building this small satellite, like plasma thruster thing. And the next summer, I was looking for something again. And then I found out that although I'm from India, I can work at one NASA facility in America. There are many of them. And that's the one I'm at, which is the Jet Propulsion Lab in California. However, they cannot pay you. And so you have to get your own funding and you have to be invited. And so I thought, how do you get invited if you don't know anyone? And so I did the same thing. I wrote an email with my CV and what I'd been doing the previous summer. And I sent it to, I think, literally 50 people. A lot of them said that, we already have someone. And then one person got back to me, Laura Kerber, and she said, oh, I have this project. Do you want to do it? And it was advantages for her because she didn't have to pay me. And I got to learn a lot. So I applied for a bunch of grants at ASU. And then together they were enough to get the funding to apply for this thing. Yeah, I love my internship with Laura. And we went on lots of adventures outside because she does field work outside. So we went to volcanoes and deserts, and by studying them on the Earth, we applied that knowledge to Mars. And so, I thought that was incredible in 2017. And then I interned at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, in 2018 and 19, and then online during the pandemic with Serena Daniega and Jeff Blood. And yeah, I've loved it every time. And so when I was about to finish my PhD, I was trying to see if I could return as a postdoc. And so I began emailing everyone I knew saying, I'm about to graduate. Do you have anything? And then all the people I knew didn't have anything. But these two scientists emailed me from JPL saying that we got your email from someone else and we have this project on comets. Are you interested? And so I said, yeah. And it was totally different for me. I've never worked on comets, and even the physics is all new to me. So I've been learning a lot. I only have 8 months left, but yeah, I've really enjoyed it. But now as I'm ending my postdoc, I have to think about the future and do, if I want to do what I want to do, then I have to get the money to do it. So I just wrote a proposal and for 3 years and it got selected. And so I learned a lot from my advisors about writing that. And this will allow me to do the project that's closest to my heart, which is, can ice melt on Mars? And if so, where? Because we see the ice disappearing, but on Earth, often it melts, but Mars, the atmosphere is very thin. So it just turns into gas usually. But we're thinking it might melt below the surface, like a few feet below. And we see this in Antarctica. And if it's melting there, because sunlight goes through the ice is sort of translucent. It lets in a lot of the light in. And then there is water there. And if there's water, there's life. So that's what we're trying to figure out. And yeah, I think I just found out about this last week that I got that proposal selected. So that was a really good high point.
Congratulations. That's a huge deal. Has it been rewarding following your passion? And if so, what advice would you have for students who are still looking to find that spark to kind of project them into their careers?
Yeah, I think, first of all, when you're in college, I would say try everything. Like I was in a lab, for example, called the Canine Research Collaboratory. Yeah, just an example of when you're in college to just try different things. And I worked in a space lab. I helped build a satellite. I worked with dogs, and I was an RA in the dorms and made lots of friends that way. So yeah, try different things, take different classes. I took a photography class. I took a woodworking class. I even took a rock band class because I play guitar. And so it's likely you'll find something that you really love. And in colleges, you have that unique opportunity of just exploring, and don't just stick to the classes in your major, even though there's obviously pressure to do that.
I think there's a misconception sometimes that when you are following your passion, that it's very one track minded. It's only your passion and nothing else. What I like about your story is you still tried so many other things and still maybe, fostered a sense of creativity by trying and exploring all of these new opportunities around you. Do you think that any of those other opportunities gave you skills or experiences that help you in your job today also?
Yeah, definitely. Because like I'll take the RA job, for example. First of all, when you get selected to be an RA in the dorms, you go through all this training to deal with students in different situations. They're away from home and maybe afraid and don't know people. And so, yeah, how to make them feel included. I think all of that applies to life in general. And then you meet different kinds of people. Like I play soccer. And so I would go to the ASU fields every Friday, and there'd be people from 25 different countries, and we'd all never have met before, but we'd form teams and be friends at the end of the evening, or enemies. And all of that comes in handy now because where I'm at too, there are people from all over the world, and we work in teams to try and solve problems when you're on a mission. And so there's a French team, an Italian team, and then there are people in the US as well, and they're all working together. So I think, yeah, all of that comes in handy. And then the creative aspect is handy because in science, for example, you have to often combine different pieces of information. Best example I can think of is in 1987, this guy I work with now, he wrote a paper saying, just theoretically, that snow can melt on Mars. And then in the 2000s, the images started coming of things that looked like snowpacks that were buried on Mars. And then my professor, Phil Christensen, he saw those images and he remembered that paper from 1987. And he said, he put them together and said, oh, what if these are snow patches? And what if when they're exposed, they melt to form these channels that we're seeing? And then he wrote a paper, and it was a very famous sort of discovery. And it was the creative aspect of putting those pieces together and then combining it with what he saw, I think, which came in very handy. So yeah, I think all of that is very useful. At least for me, my guiding sort of principle is that I have a bunch of things I want to do before I die. And some of those are like research related. And then some of those are like making a movie and writing and recording an album and things like that. So my goal is to finish all of them before it's too late. So if you can find those things that drive you, and it doesn't have to be things per se. Yeah, I think that's the key, is explore and then try to find, like you said, what sparks your passion and then that meaning in your life.
And for all those listening, if you'd like to know more about Aditya's experience, he's given us his LinkedIn that you can reach out to him on. So I'll just spell his first and last name for you, just so you can find him. So it's going to be Aditya, last name Khuller.
Yeah, so now you've used all the letters on the keyboard.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciated having you. To hear more alumni advice, head to our episode page wherever you listen to podcasts. You can visit the college's YouTube channel or visit thecollege.asu.edu/LFE podcast. See you next time.